Bereshis Vayigash on 250, 251 in our scrolls. You don't have to follow, but you can. It's very dramatic, this parsha. And it begins in a situation, is a dire situation. Yosef has said they're going to take the little brother Binyamin as a slave. And the brothers know that if they allow Binyamin to stay behind, the father warned him that it's going to kill me. You can't do that. They didn't want to let him go in the first place. And now they're afraid they're going to have to go back and tell him. So Yehuda sort of is inspired, and he stands up as the leader of the Jewish people at that point, or of the brothers, and he is going to confront Yosef, which is an amazing thing. Right? I mean, Yehuda represents the kingship of the Jewish people, Yosef representing the kingship of the most powerful nation of the time, of Egypt. Right? Not knowing that it's his brother. Right? All he knows is that this man is doing this, and he's putting his life and all of his brother's life on a chance they could be killed by this man for what he does. So up until this point they negotiate and they talk and they argue to try to get their brother back and to try to convince this despot, this leader, to allow them to come. So they see nothing's going to happen. They're not going to get their brother out. So finally the parsha begins, Vayigash alav Yehuda, and Yehuda, it says he approaches him, is the English translation, but it's really saying that he sort of rushes upon him. Vayigash is a forceful approach, not like a nice, sophisticated way of walking into a room, making just showing up nicely. This is an aggressive thing. So it says that Yosef alav Yehuda approaches him, V'yomer, and he says, Bi Adoni, please my master. Yadaber na avdecha davar bi ozne Adoni. It says, please let your servants, myself, speak into your ears. And then he says, why? Ki chamocha ka Pharaoh, because you are to me like Pharaoh. And we know Pharaoh said earlier that he told Yosef, you are the same as me, except I sit on the throne. That is to say, you are as powerful as Pharaoh. The only person you have to respond to is me, Pharaoh. Everybody else you're above everybody else. So now Yehuda says to him, you are to me like Pharaoh. So here the commentaries bring up a number of things that this means, this one line. Because what's happening here? Here you have Yehuda rushing up to Yosef. Right? You have like this aggressive stand of these two monarchs facing each other. Yosef wants to hold back his brother Binyamin, who they don't know it's his brother. Yehuda wants him back. And there's this really strong confrontation. And at the end of the statement he says, you are to me like Pharaoh. Like, so what? What's it got to do with it? You're like Pharaoh. So is he trying to praise him? What's he trying to say to him that he makes such a statement? So Rashi talks about this. Let's see, where is it? Ki chamocha Pharaoh, you are like Pharaoh. Chashuv ata bi'enei kamelech. The simple understanding is that Yehuda is saying to Yosef, you are like the king to me. In other words, it's a praise. He's saying, I have a lot of respect for you. You're like the king. You're the same as Pharaoh. Nevertheless, we need to deal with this. We can't just sweep this under the carpet. That's the simple meaning. The midrasho, and the deeper meaning, Sofecha lelakos alav b'tsaras kamo shelaka paro ayidei zekanti Sarah alayla echas Yaakova. He says, in the end, you're going to receive a punishment just like Pharaoh before you did. When that Pharaoh before you took my grandmother Sarah as a wife, he grabbed her and he kidnapped her to be a wife. So he got saras. He got this disease for trying to be with her. You're going to get the same thing. Otherwise, you're not going to get away with this. Just like Pharaoh didn't. To me, you're like Pharaoh. And the one opinion is, you're like Pharaoh. You're like the king. The other one is no. Remember Pharaoh? You're like Pharaoh. Pharaoh tried to stand up with the Jews. See what happened to him? You starting up with the Jews, this is what's going to happen to you. Davar achar, Rashi says another thing. Ma Pharaoh gozer v'einu mekayim. Just like Pharaoh makes rulings and they don't necessarily happen. Maftia v'einu osa ela ataken. And you are the same. So what does he mean? He says that Pharaoh makes rulings. Right? Pharaoh says, everybody's got to pay money to me, everyone's got to do this, everyone's got to do that. It doesn't necessarily happen. Why? You can say, Pharaoh says, he'll say, I want in 2 days from now, you should come see me. And Pharaoh dies the next day. So the guy can't come see him. Right? Who's the only person that can make a statement that is a ruling, and you know it's going to happen, that's God, nobody else. So he's telling Pharaoh, don't think you're so powerful. You're just Pharaoh. Right? In other words, you think you can make rules? That's not necessarily the case. So you see that in these words are many different meanings. And most likely what we're hearing is this is a negotiation going on. Yehuda is confronting Yosef, confronting the guy like Pharaoh. He's confronting him, and he's responding back to him, and they're negotiating back and forth. Right? And really, if you look at the wording, there's nothing that happens in this section that's any different than what we just saw at the end of last week's Parsha, where Yehuda is also trying with the brothers to get Binyamin back and to get out of there alive. And here suddenly it says that he goes one-to-one and he talks to Yosef as if he's Pharaoh, and he says the same thing. But yet this time it works. What's the difference between before and now? So the answer is that Yehuda was using a very important tactic, which is a very important tactic for everyday life, which is up until now Yehuda has been talking to Yosef through an interpreter, because as far as Yehuda knew, this man didn't understand Hebrew. He's an Egyptian. He's not a Jew. So he doesn't understand Hebrew. So Yehuda would tell the Hebrew to an interpreter, a translator. The translator would put it into Egyptian and tell it to Yosef. Yosef, of course, understood every word he was saying, but pretended he didn't. And when you speak from one king to another, one prince to another, a diplomat to another, there's a certain way of speaking. There's words of diplomacy. There's protocol. You can't just talk directly to someone. Like, they say if you ever have the instance to be somewhere and the Queen comes. So if the Queen of England comes by, you can't just talk to her. If she comes, she has to talk to you. If she speaks to you, you can respond. But you cannot initiate a conversation. That's protocol. You can't extend your hand to Prince Charles, for instance, right? Or Andrew. You can't. They're not allowed to do that. They have to extend their hand to you. You can't do any of those things. That's protocol. That's what Yehuda and Yosef were doing. They had protocol. Here's these visitors are coming in, meeting with this very important political figure, and he has to act in a certain manner. Suddenly, what happens now is that Yehuda throws all that out. Up until now, he goes through the protocol and he says, please, and we would like to get my brother, we'd like to do this, we'd like to do this, and he's not getting anywhere. So finally Yehuda says, I'm putting protocol aside, and we're going to talk heart to heart, man to man. And he rushes up to him and he looks him in the eye and he says the exact same thing, but he does it without an interpreter. He does it without the protocol. So it makes a difference. Why does it make a difference? So they say, I'll illustrate it with a story of the Chafetz Chaim. One time a Jewish man got in trouble in Poland. Something to do with the government. I forgot. I'd read what it was, but he did something wrong, or it appeared to be wrong, and he was taken to court. And the man asked the Chafetz Chaim, the famous Rabbi Yisrael Meir Kagan, to come and to speak on his behalf as like a character witness. So he goes. Now, of course, the Chafetz Chaim didn't speak Polish; he spoke Yiddish. But even if he understood some Polish, he was speaking Yiddish. So he would have a translator there to translate his Yiddish into Polish for the judge and for the people in the room to understand what he's saying. So the Chafetz Chaim starts making an appeal for this man. And he's asking, and you can see it, and his emotions coming through, and his care and his love for this man, and his respect for this man. And you don't have to understand a word he's saying, but you can see it, right? So after he goes through this, the translator's about to begin. And the judge stops him. And he says, I don't have to understand the words of what this man's saying. I can feel his emotions. I can feel how he feels by what he's saying, the intensity of what he's saying, the intimacy of his words. Therefore, I don't need the translation. I understand that this person who's on trial is a good person. That's the point here. When Yehuda approaches Yosef, he puts aside all protocol. He puts aside all rules. And he has a one-to-one, face-to-face, heart-to-heart talk with him. And then it works. The exact same words, the exact same arguments suddenly work because he's talking directly to him. And it's an important thing to understand that when people, there are times when when things are normal. Everything's the way it is. It's how it's supposed to be. And we talk to people and ask, how are you? And everyone says fine, no matter how they are. right? Doesn't matter, you're not fine. I mean, it's just in fact, they could say I'm not fine and they'll still say good, because we don't even listen necessarily, because we're not really asking them how they are. It's just a thing to say. How are you? How's it going? What's happening? No, we don't really have it. We're not really necessarily interested. We might be, but that's not why we say it, right? Sometimes you see in a conversation with someone, or you see someone, there's something wrong. They might not tell you. I see it sometimes with people, because over the years I've learned to read people. I can see they're not acting the same. I can see an emotion. I can see a change in how they're standing and how they're acting. It's nothing superhuman on my part. Lots of people can do this, and you know there's something wrong. So then you can't just do the normal everyday thing. How are you? Fine, okay, right? You have to sit down and say, listen, something's wrong. You can tell me that you don't want to tell me what's wrong, but you can't tell me nothing's wrong. I can see it. So if you'd like, I'm here to help you. I'd like to help you. And I have this happen often with people, because I know I can't do the normal things. That's what Yehuda did here. Yehuda realized this is life and death. This is an important thing. Protocol's not working. Everyday talk is not working. I have to become extremely intimate in my conversation with this man, either aggressively intimate or personally intimate, but somehow I have to make him understand. I can't be just another person coming in and talking to him. I have to be made real, human. I have to be a person to him. And that's what Yehuda did, and it worked. Yehuda accomplished that. Now, this is, of course, just the beginning of it, and then Yosef, by this, becomes extremely moved, and he realizes that it's time for him to tell his brothers who he is. They don't know who he is. And it says, as we go on, it says, if you look on the next page, on 252, 253, beginning of the 45th chapter, in English it says, now Joseph cannot restrain himself in the presence of all who stood before him. So he called out, remove everyone from before me. What happens is Joseph now can't hold himself back. He has to tell his brothers who he is. He's no longer able to wait. So he basically tells his assistants, get rid of all of the Egyptians. I don't want them here for this. They don't need to see my emotion. They don't need to see my family getting together. They don't need to hear the story. Get them out. Right? Just like when we're upset, you don't want strangers around. It's your family. You're having an issue with your family. You want to deal with the family. You don't need guests then. Everyone should get out. And he does. And so he says to them, I am Yosef. I am your brother Yosef. Is my father still alive? And then we have the whole conversation that goes on here. One of the most extraordinarily moving, intimate statements in the Torah, where he reveals himself to his brothers. And it says in the Gemara that his brothers are frightened to death. In fact, the Gemara uses a expression that they say, the Gemara tells a story of Oy lanu leyom hamisa, Oy to us, for the day we're going to die. Just like Joseph's brothers felt when Joseph revealed himself. That's what the Gemara tells a story. But that when a person feels like they're about to die, they suddenly come to the realization that maybe they didn't live their life the way they should have. There's no more rationalization. Right? I'm about to meet my maker. So too Yosef, when he reveals himself to his brothers, you can imagine his brothers who felt that what they did was correct, who have been going through all of these crazy things. They don't understand this man. They go down there to buy food. The man doesn't want to sell them food. Then the man says they're spies. And the man says, I'll believe you're not spies if you bring back your brother. So they give him the food, the money. They take back some food. They go back, leaving one brother behind in order to get the other brother, right? They bring back the other brother. He seems to know how old they are. He seems to know who they all are. They look in their bag. All their money has been returned. All of the food is still there. They're so confused by what's going on here. It makes absolutely no sense, right? Then suddenly, after all of this is going on and on and on, like day after day, they travel back to Egypt. They go from Egypt to Israel to Egypt, back and forth. They pay their money. They find their money. They find a cup. They don't know what's going on. Suddenly he says, I am Yosef, and that all makes sense. Now they realize that the premise that we had, that Yosef is dead, Yosef's been sold, it was right what we did, it wasn't right, there was a problem, that all of these things that this man has done to us is because it's Yosef. He wants us, right? We now understand everything that happened. It's because he's Yosef. We, interestingly enough, find in the Haftorah If we look in the Haftorah here, again, you don't have to look, I can read it, but if you want to, you can. There's a Haftorah for each one of the parshas in the back of the book. So it also has the Haftorah for this week's parsha. Let's see. Where do we find it? Oh, I'm getting closer. I'm almost in the same part. Okay. Very close. It's on page 1144, and it says Haftorah for Vayigash. And here it has this whole story in here from Yecheskel the prophet. And most people say that the illusion of, what a Haftorah really is that there was a time in history where the Jews are not allowed to have public reading of the Torah. The non-Jewish government wouldn't allow it. So that the Jews shouldn't forget it. The Torah, the rabbis made a thing where they would read a section of the prophets that had similarity to the parsha, which would cause you to remember. That's right. That's where it came from. And because we want to remember the insult to us, we leave it. We still keep it in the service. So everyone asks, what is the relationship between the Haftorah of a particular week and the parsha? So most people say it's right here. It says in the beginning, the word of Hashem came to me. It says, now you take yourself one wooden tablet and write on it for Yehuda and the children of Israel, his comrades. And take another one and write on it for Joseph, the wooden tablet of Ephraim and the children of Israel, his comrades. So here you say, what do you have? You have Yehuda on one piece of tablet. You have Yosef another, and then you're going to put them together. And you're going to become the Jewish people. So that's what this is. Right here you have Yehuda. He has a confrontation with Yosef. They realize they're brothers. They get together. Right? That's it. That's not, I believe, really the answer. If you look at the answer, I believe, you can find later on. The last line of the Haftorah. I'll read the last section, beginning with 26. It goes through this whole history, and then it says, I shall seal a covenant of peace with them, an eternal covenant shall be with them, and I shall emplace them, and I will increase them, and I shall place my sanctuary among them forever. We're just talking about the Jews in the future. My dwelling place shall be upon them, and I shall be for a God unto them, and they shall be unto me for a people. Then the nations shall know that I am Hashem, who sanctifies Israel, and my sanctuary is among them. This line where he says that the nations will know, V'yedu agoyim, the nations will know, Ki ani Hashem, I am God. That line is very similar to the line in our parsha where Yosef says, Ani Yosef, I'm Yosef. In our case, as soon as he says Yosef, the brothers suddenly realize everything that happened was not illogical. It was totally logical. Everything made sense. Because this is Joseph. Joseph is doing this stuff. Now we understand why he knew, how he knew who we were, how he knew how old we were, how he knew there was another brother, why he wanted to see that other brother, because this is the only real full brother from the same mother. Right? Now it all makes sense. It's the same thing here. The Haftorah deals with an issue of all of the things that go on in the world. All of the anti-Semitism, all of the pain, all of the punishment, all of the killing, all of the cruelty that even has nothing to do directly with us. It doesn't appear directly to have anything to do with us. What goes on with the floods and the hurricanes and the crazy governments and the coups and all of these things that happen in the world, they seem to make no sense. Why does God allow all this evil to happen in the world? All of these things happen. It's the same questions that the brothers were asking. Why is all of these crazy things happening? We come down to Egypt just to buy food. We'll buy the food, we'll leave. Right? It's like, imagine, you go to Sobeys, you want to go shopping. You go shopping, and then instantly going to Sobeys, it's like Alice in Wonderland. Like they think first they accuse you of shoplifting. Then they say that they don't take your money anymore. And then they don't want you to be there because they don't like how you look. Whatever it is, it's like crazy, right? That's what's happening to these brothers. It's exactly what the Haftorah is saying. The Haftorah is saying the world is full of all types of trouble and pain, and the things look crazy. And the good people seem to be on the bottom, and the bad people seem to be successful. Finally, in the end, it says, and the day will come when I will say, I am God. And the non-Jews, the nations of the world, will know that I am God. That statement, when God says that, suddenly everything in the history of the world will make sense. We'll all see why this happened, why the temple was destroyed, why the Holocaust happened, why people are in pain, why people are good, why this person is knocked down and that one is lifted up. Why is it? It'll all make sense that moment when God will reveal himself, and suddenly we'll understand all of history. Just like Yosef reveals himself and we suddenly realize everything in history of these people in this confrontation makes sense. So that's what I believe is the similarity between the two. And it's a message to us that if you're living in times where things seem to be upside down, where people who you think are good are getting in trouble for doing things bad, when people are doing things that you can't imagine a person to do, and there are people who represent Torah doing it. Or you see governments that are supposed to be good governments acting badly. You see a good God who's supposed to be kind, making floods and fires and hurricanes. You say, why does all of this happen? All the horrible things. And we don't know why. But when God reveals himself, suddenly all of history will make sense. Just like when Yosef revealed himself, all of history makes sense. That's, I think, the similarities. And in our own lives, we experience this. And we always say, we don't have an answer. Why does this happen? Why does this happen? Why does this happen? We had the same idea, like, at the end of last week's Parsha, here you have this whole confrontation with Yosef. And you say, why did they wait until this week's Parsha for the end? Like in the end, last week's Parsha, it builds up, it builds up, it builds up, because finally Yosef takes away Binyamin. Yosef's doing all these things to them, and then the Parsha ends. Right? Like, why don't they just take it through to the end of the story where Joseph reveals himself, and now it all makes sense, and then next week's Parsha we start after Joseph revealed himself. And the answer is because sometimes, in order to understand something, you have to wait. Time is not enough. Is the only thing that you can do is to wait. In other words, we live in a society where everything's instant, everything's fast. And we're used to having answers. The only time that we have to wait is when there's a television show and it ends and it says, stay tuned next week for the second half of this show. And that's what people think is happening in the Parsha. Because we think everything has to be fast. And we look outside and we see people in pain and people who are hurt and things that happen that seem to be terrible. And we say, how horrible is it? What kind of a God allows these things? And the truth is, if you wait, you get the answer. And if you wait, you see that it's not horrible at all. If you wait, you find out the real meaning. If you wait, you find out that everything is truly good. And therefore, the Parsha ended last week with like a cliffhanger, and then this week it finishes it. The reason that the Parsha ended that way is to teach us sometimes you have to wait. And now that we've waited, God will reveal himself, just like Yosef reveals himself. But sometimes you have to wait. Sometimes it's not instant. So that's another point of what we're seeing here. So now Yosef at this point here on 253, right, has sent out everyone from his household, right? And he tells his brothers who he is. And he asks them the first thing, is my father still alive? And this seems to be a sort of a ridiculous question for him to ask, because all he's had was conversations with his brothers who didn't know they were his brother about their father. His father, my father, if I have to bring Binyamin down and something happens and my father says he'll die. Well, he must be alive if he says he'll die, right? And we're going to go back to Egypt and we're going to talk to our father about bringing our brother, back to Israel and talk to our father. Right? They come back to Egypt, they say, we saw our father. So what does he say? I am Yosef, is my father still alive? And where does that come from? Well, he knows he's still alive. I understand that they tried to murder him, but does he presume that they were lying? That all of these things about their father this, their father that, their father this, their father that, if you take Binyamin, our father will die. They say you can't do that. So Yosef is actually asking a different question. Yosef is saying, I'm Yosef. Right? Remember what they're doing? They're fighting for Binyamin. They want Binyamin back. If you don't give us Binyamin back, our father is going to die. Our father can't do this. He only has 2 sons from his wife Rachel. One of them was killed already. That was Yosef. One's gone. The other one's left Binyamin. And now you're going to take away this other one. Our father's going to die. So Yosef says back to them, I'm Yosef. Is my father alive? In other words, you say my father would die if he loses a son? I'm the son. All right? Did my father die when he lost me? He didn't die. Right? Is he still alive? And it's a rhetorical question. He's not. He knows he's alive. But that's all they've been talking about. He's trying to prove a point to them. You think you guys know it all. You made a decision that I should be killed or I should be sold, and then you went back and told my father that I was killed? That's what you did? My father's still alive, isn't he? So your whole premise is wrong. If my father didn't die because I was taken, he's not going to die because I take Binyamin either. Right? That was his idea. He was showing them the fallacy of their thoughts, that their logic is wrong, going all the way back to the fact that they sold him in the first place. Right? And now it tells us that Yosef gets permission from Pharaoh to send off his brothers to go and to bring lots of stuff, lots of gifts and clothing and food back to their father, Yaakov, in Israel. And Pharaoh gives them permission to do that, and off they go. And then now they go back and they tell their father that Yosef's still alive. Right? That's an amazing occurrence. Right? It's here on 257. They went up from Egypt and came to the land of Canaan to Jacob their father, and they told him, saying, Joseph is still alive. Also he is ruler over the land of Egypt, but his heart rejected it. Yaakov didn't believe it. He couldn't believe them. However, when they related to him all of the words Joseph had spoken to them, and he saw the wagons that Joseph had sent to transport him, then the spirit of their father was revived. In other words, then he believed them. So when they came back and said, Joseph's alive, he didn't believe them. After all these years, I don't hear from him. You told me he was murdered. Now you're telling me he's alive? Not only he's alive, he's the king of Egypt. What are you, crazy people? Right? Your brother is the king of Egypt. Right? He's dead. What do you mean he's the king of Egypt? Right? But then it says, oh, you didn't tell me that he sent wagons. Sent wagons. Now I believe you. Well, what is that? Like, you imagine a kid gets taken away from his father, and then they find him, and after, you have it in the paper, this kind of thing happens. 10 years later, they find the kid, and the father's been worried all these years where the kid is, and they say, we found your child. He was locked up in some guy's house for 10 years. He wouldn't let him out. And he's been there, right, and he forgot who he was and everything. And the father says, oh, what are you, lying to me? What kind of crazy story is this? Of course it's not true. And they said, yes, it's true. How, and why is it true? Oh, well, because when we came back, we brought with us his wagon, his red wagon, a red wagon. Right? Oh, a red wagon. So it must be true. Like, what does that got to do with it? Maybe it's not his red wagon, somebody else's red wagon. He didn't have a red wagon when he left. Now he's got a red wagon. Who cares? What suddenly Yosef sent these wagons that suddenly made a big difference? So the Medrash tells us in a famous Medrash in the Gemara, and it says that really Yosef was sending a message to his father when he sent the wagons. Because the word for wagon in Hebrew is agalah. Agalah is a wagon. So, but Joseph was sending a hint to his father that it's true what his brothers are saying, because Joseph used to learn with his father. He used to learn Torah with his father, and one of the things is a law called the law of the Eglah Arufa. The Eglah Arufa is in the Torah, and it's a mitzvah. And what happens is if you have two cities near each other, and they wake up in the morning in the two cities, and they go out in between to do commerce, and they find on the ground in between these two cities a dead man. A man who apparently was violently murdered. Like some thieves got him in the night. As he was traveling from one city to the next, they saw this guy by himself. They went out and they killed him. They took his money and they left. Now the next day, the honest people of the city find him laying dead on the road, in the highway between the two cities. So the two cities want to know who's responsible for him. The city where he's going, or the city where he came from. So they measure the distance and they see where was he closer. If he was closer to the city he came from, so they're responsible. If it's closer to the city he's going to, they're responsible. And what does it mean they're responsible? Is that they didn't treat the man correctly. Here's a man in our city, and he's a guest, and he's visiting, and we let him go in the middle of the night to the next city by himself, without guards, without people, without helping him, without giving him a place to sleep so he could leave the next morning. So therefore we have some responsibility for the fact that he was killed. So they have to assume responsibility, and they have to fulfill a ritual. It's a ritual of the Eglah Arufa, which is, an Eglah is a baby cow, and they take it and they break its neck as a symbol of what had happened, and they assume responsibility for what they did wrong. Right? They say it was our fault. We should have taken care of him. We should have given him a place to sleep. We should have been watching. Right? Should have been taking care of crime. It's our fault. So Yosef and his father Yaakov, according to the Gemara, were learning the laws of the Eglah Rufa. And the word Eglah and the word Agalah are very similar, right? Eglah, Agalah. So he said, by sending the wagons, Yaakov saw the wagons and remembered that they were learning and said, this is a message from my son. It wasn't the wagon that made him remember. It was the hint, right? It was done on purpose. But interestingly enough, it's a funny thing, right, that this is what really happened. So we have to understand really what is the message behind saying this is what they were learning and this is the message, and this weird mitzvah, right, of how they killed this animal and they assume responsibility for what they did. The point is that why this person died, right, that we found between these two cities, because we didn't go out of our way for him. We didn't do chesed for him. We weren't kind. We didn't invite him into our home. If we invited him into our home, he would have slept in our house. I can understand if, let's say I'm in New York. If I spend an extra night in New York, it's another $200 for a hotel. So what I'll do is I'll spend the day in New York, and when it's time to leave, I'll get in my car and I'll start driving home. So I'll get home in the morning. So I'll sleep the next day, but I don't have to pay the $200, and I'm home. Right? But if somebody in New York would give me a free hotel room, then I would sleep in it, and I wouldn't leave till the next day. So nobody cared in this town to give this Jewish guy, this Jew, a place in their house to sleep. Right? So he went, and therefore he got killed. So they have responsibility. The idea of going beyond the letter of the law, of making sure that you take interest and care and assuming responsibility for things, is the exact same thing as with Yosef. Because when Yosef's brothers decided, according to the letter of the law, that what Yosef was doing was wrong. Now, when Yosef, in the beginning of this whole story, was going around telling his brothers, you're going to bow down to me, and my father's going to bow down to me, and all of the mothers are going to bow down to me, and I'm going to be a ruler, and he's not the firstborn, and he's not, right? Why is that? And then his father treats him special. So the brothers say, this guy is trying to overthrow our rule. Like, in other words, the oldest brother is going to be in charge. He's trying to overthrow us. Right? He's making up these stories, going to overthrow us. They said, according to the letter of the law, if you try to overthrow the kingdom, you should be killed. The king can kill you. Right? Normal. Right? The king will kill you if you try to have a coup or you take over the government. So they said, that's what we're going to do. They made a judgment. We're going to kill Yosef, because that's what he was doing. That's one of the opinions. By the fact that they followed the letter of the law in such a case, and they were so strict about the law, right, that's where their error was. You see, yes, according to the letter of the law, it could have been true. It could have been right that Yosef should be killed. It could be. It wasn't going to happen because we needed Yosef, but it could be that was right. But they should have gone beyond just doing what the Torah says. They should go and also apply the Torah's idea of chesed, of kindness, of care, of sensitivity, and realize, who is this person? It's our brother. Do we have to kill him? Can't we do something else? Can't we do something that's less of a problem? Can't we try to help him? But no, this is what we have to do, and he has to be killed. And that's what they did. They sent him away instead of killing him. But they wanted to kill him. That's the idea of the Agla Rufa, is that, do we really have to, if a guy is in our city, do we really have to have him in our house for free at night? Do we really, and what if the guy said no and still wants to go? Do we really have to stop him from going? Or do we really have to accompany him to the next city in case there's burglars? You imagine if you have a city, like the city of Toronto, every time somebody wants to go to Montreal, we have to hire a policeman to go with him, and we have to pay for it because he wants to go to Montreal? That's what it's telling us. So that's not the law. But that's what you should do. You should make sure that people come, they should be taken care of. They should be treated correctly. And that's the same idea. The same idea. The message that Yosef was sending was that same idea. And Yaakov, of course, understood it because they learned that together. Now, interestingly enough, it tells us an interesting story, and I think it was with a Vilna Gaon. Vilna Gaon was a great luminary, a man whose his piety and his intelligence, his knowledge, was way beyond anyone else of his era. He was like a unique individual, way, way, way different than everybody else. Now, he wasn't like, Albert Einstein's a genius. Right? This guy was a genius's genius. He was just so different and knew so much, it was almost, people couldn't understand it. So it says a story that one time a woman got married, and as what happens sometimes is the husband disappeared. He went away to raise money for an institution. He never came back. Now, did he run away? Did he marry somebody else and say, I have no marriage, and just run away? Did he fail and feel like, I can't come back, I'm embarrassed? But we don't know. Maybe he was killed. Maybe something happened. Now, the woman's now stuck. She's called an aguna. She's chained to her first husband because she doesn't have a divorce. She doesn't know if he's dead. She doesn't know what to do. So what happens in such a case, right, where you have a woman like that? So you need to have witnesses come and tell you that he's dead. Right? So after years go by, suddenly a man comes back to this town, and he says, I'm her husband. I'm her husband. I was gone, and I got sick, and I wasn't able to get back, and I had no money, and I had to wait till I was cured, and it took all these years, but I'm the husband. Now, the woman doesn't recognize him. It's been like 15 years. right, from when they first got married. So the rabbis decide, well, before she can live with this man, we've got to make sure it's her husband. So they ask him questions. So you're at you had a wedding? Yeah. What date was your wedding? What's your anniversary? Tell us the anniversary. Tell me, what was your wife wearing at the wedding? Tells him. What did it look like? Tells him. What were you wearing at the wedding? Tells him. What kind of flowers were there? What was the meal? Who said the Sheva brachas? Who was the rabbi? He has all the answers, right? So they go to the Vilna Gaon. They don't know what to do because something's fishy, but he has all the answers. So the Vilna Gaon says, go to him and ask him, where does he sit in shul? Right? Because people have a set seat in shul. Ask him, where does he sit in shul? So they went back, and he clearly didn't know the answer. He floundered and this and that, didn't know. So they said, wow, the Vilna Gaon is not only a genius, he's a miracle maker. And he knows this guy wasn't real, and he knew the question to ask. But so they went back and told the Vilna Gaon, he says, I'm not a miracle maker. It's very simple. When you have the kind of person who's prepared to take somebody else's wife, because she was wealthy, she had a lot of money, he's ready to come and pretend he's somebody else to live in the most serious sin that we have, right? To take somebody else's wife. It's a horrible thing to do, right? And in order to have financial gain, he's going to investigate, of course, and have all the information to answer your questions. He's not going to just walk in here cold and think he's going to get away with this. He's a smart guy. He investigates it. But what is a guy who is prepared to, for the sake of money, to do this? What's important to him? Money. It's important to him. Physical things are important to him. So you ask him, what kind of suit were you wearing? What kind of shoes do you have? What color was your wife's dress at the wedding? What color flowers did they have? Those are things that a person like that would know. But a person like that is not going to ask questions about spirituality. He's not going to know about his soul. Because he doesn't care. He's prepared to give it up. So he doesn't care. So I said, go and ask him where he sits in shul. Because if it's him, he's going to know where he sits in shul. But it's him. Yeah. But if it's not him, he's not going to ask that question because he doesn't care about the spiritual world. He doesn't think of it. So he didn't think to ask that question. So I'm not a miracle maker. I just know people. And that guy, right, if he was telling the truth, fine. If he's lying, he's not going to know this. And that's exactly what happened. It's the same idea. When Yosef went back to his father, right, they didn't believe it was Yosef. They didn't believe. The brothers come back. Dad, you're not going to believe it. Yosef's alive. Not only he's alive, but he's the king of that country. Not only is he the king of that country, he's that crazy guy who's making us nuts all this time. He's the one. So come on, he wants you to come to Egypt with us, right? So the father said, hey, you guys are like, what have you been doing on the road? Like, why are you're crazy. How do you say these things? And he sees the wagons and he says, oh, you're telling the truth. Why? Because Yosef understood that his father is going to care about Yosef's neshama, about his soul, about who he is. And he knows that, and he knows that his father knows that Yosef is going to care about it, because he knew Yosef, even though it was many years, he knew him. So Yosef sent back the message. This is what we were learning. We were learning about the Eglah Rufa, about this calf. That's what, right? Because if he went back and he told Yosef, Yaakov, this is what I was wearing. That's not Yosef. But he says, this is the Torah we were learning together, because that's important to Yosef, and Yaakov knew it was really him. That's how he knew. So that's what it tells us there.
Rothman, what was I going to say?
I don't know. That's the question. It's not much of a question. Ask the question to my friend here. She'll answer for you.
I think you are. I know you are. What's his name? Yaakov knew all the time from Hashem, of course, that
Yosef was alive?
Yosef was alive.
No, he didn't. Yosef Yaakov was purposely, it was hidden from him. God did not give him that knowledge.
Not at all, no. Really. I thought so. Thank you.
Sure. Now,
Rabbi.
Yeah.
I just wondered, is there any is there any indication that there was remorse that Yaakov treated Yosef so special, so to cause so much bitterness?
Well, we certainly don't see that. We certainly don't see that, and we actually see that Yaakov does it again. because he does it with Yosef's kids, which we'll see next week, how he treats one kid better than the other, the younger one over the older one. So we don't necessarily see that to be the case, but we do have, there is a, on that vein, I'll tell you another thought. You know,
I mean, sorry, you know, I wanted to bring attention. I mean, you see today sometimes parents are,
they have
will
favorites.
still do that.
They play favorites.
And there's so much, yeah.
Right. Well, so we have to see if really it would have applied here in the same way. Certainly we presume that one of the things that went wrong was that Yaakov treated Yosef special, right? And therefore the brothers weren't happy about that. Right? I think we can say that that's probably true. But we don't see that as them saying that that's the reason that they did what they did. It says that they did what they did because of the things he said about how I'm going to be the ruler. You're going to bow down to me. Right? Now the fact that his father treated him special probably reinforced that. But that was really the basis. And you see that Yaakov continues to do that. So I don't think that he considered that necessarily evil. Maybe it was misused. But I don't think he saw it that way. Sometimes it could be appropriate, sometimes not. So I don't think he sees it.
Isn't it indicative in the bitterness they felt towards him?
Well, definitely it could have added to it. It could have added to it. That they had that feeling of jealousy because their father treats him special. But it was exasperated by the fact that he himself had these visions of grandeur. I'm going to be the king. You're going to bow down. Not only you, yeah, my father's going to bow down to me.
It does, yeah, like even that, like even if, like, though it turned out to be true, isn't it that we're not supposed to speak to people like that?
Mm-hmm.
But
it tells us that Yosef was a child. It says he was a nar. He was an adolescent, and therefore he said things that perhaps in the way that he said it was not appropriate.
But at the end, it looks. You get the feeling at the end, like, say, "See, I told you so." Like Joseph.
No, in the end,
not like their
dreams
own
were
story.
true.
Not, but you know, I know, but you're left with a feeling like Joseph said, "See, you know, I was right," and like.
No, but he doesn't do that.
Bow down to me, and
he doesn't do that. But the reality is, his dreams came true. But there's no question that it was exasperated by the fact of how he told his brothers, because he was such a young kid. He didn't do it well. He didn't do it in the way a mature person would do it. He did it incorrectly.
But you get what I'm saying? Like. Yeah,
I hear it. I'm agreeing with you. He said he said it in a way that exasperated the situation, and
it's never sort of seems to be talked about.
I think it doesn't. No, they don't talk much at all.
It's just, you know, they're so bad what they did. Just so bad.
Well, it is. No matter how jealous one brother is of another, he can't kill him. All right? You can't. All right? No matter how much I favor one son or another, that's no rationale that he can kill him. So they wanted to kill him. But by virtue of the fact that the story is told the way it is, shows you that Yosef had some responsibility for how he said things. That's why he's referred to as a nar, as a child. They call him that in the Torah.
Okay. And what about the father now?
So I don't think that they consider that the Torah shows that as necessarily an evil. Sometimes it's wrong to do this, but it could be that they find that sometimes it's not. For the way Yosef spoke, the Torah seems to say is wrong. For the other case, it doesn't necessarily say it. It could be, in our lives, we certainly cannot treat our children with favor one over another, because we see what it does. It might be different in different generations and different times. It may be less of an issue of self-identity and self-respect that they didn't feel it the same way. It's hard to say. But let's take a look back, using your question to answer something else. When it says in here, right in the beginning, it says that Yosef could no longer hold himself back. Right? The brothers are there. Right? He sees Binyamin, and now he has all these emotions inside of him. You can imagine he's been gone for his entire adult life. He was an adolescent when he was sold. His entire adult life, he went through such crazy things. He's sold. He goes down to Egypt. He's being chased by a woman. He goes to jail. Right? And then suddenly he comes out and he's this great Yosef. He can't share it with anyone. He has no family. So suddenly he sees his family, and his little brother, who is his only brother, full brother, right? Who reminds him of his mother, who he hasn't seen since he was a kid. And so he now responds, right, that he has to expose himself. He has to say who he is. He has to expose his identity. And he's got to say who he is now. And it says he can't hold himself back. So the commentators say, why did they say that he can't hold himself back? So to understand it, we have to understand, why did he hold himself back at all? What was the purpose? Why didn't he saw the brothers, right? He's already the second in charge. Why didn't he just tell them, I'm Yosef, go get our father, you have all the food you want for free, don't worry about it. Why did he put him through all of these things? Go take this one, take that one, you're spies, I'll take your money, I'll put back your money. Like, why did he do all these weird things to them in the first place? This wasn't his form of nechama, of getting them back. That's not why he was doing it. The idea is as follows. When the brothers sold him, and the brothers were prepared to kill him, what they did was wrong. And Yosef understood through his prophetic vision that there were certain things that he could do to his brothers which would be a kapara, which would atone for what they did. Right? He would do things to them that would help in the big picture, in the relationship of the future of the Jewish people, would help the Jewish people. Because the way it was right now, there was an enormous debt that was owed. Because the Jewish people took one member of the Jewish people, Yosef, and they were going to kill him. Right? Yosef, by making them go through this pain that he did, was able to assist them on a metaphysical level, so that debt would be paid. Right? In fact, the Sfas Emes says that if Yosef could have held out and had waited longer, then there would have been even a greater blessing. What does he mean? Is that all of the time that Yosef held back, and Yosef did these things to his brothers, the brothers were becoming more and more atoned for what they did wrong. That is, that for the future, right, remember, the actions of our forefathers have an effect on us. In the future, that debt has to be paid, and we have to pay that debt as the Jews. There was something wrong. In a metaphysical level, it's carried over into us spiritually, that there's a debt that one brother was going to be murdered by the other brothers. The idea that you have hatred among Jews comes from this. The fact that Jews don't get along very often, and there's always fighting and arguing and hurting each other, that happens because of this fight. Right? The fact that it's only as bad as it is because Yosef was able to get the brothers to somewhat atone for what they did. Because Sfas Emes explains to us in his statement that if the longer Yosef had waited, the more of an atonement there would have been. And because he didn't wait, the atonement only went so far. Now, he wasn't superhuman. He went as far as he could, but he didn't go all the way. It says he can't hold himself back. Not that he chooses to not hold himself back. He can't. He got to a point where he couldn't go anymore. If you look in the liturgy for Yom Kippur, or you look in Tisha B'Av, you'll notice the story of the 10 martyrs. There are 10 martyrs, 10 great Jewish rabbis. Rabbi Akiva, for instance, is one of them, who were murdered by the Romans. Right? And it says in there that the reason they were murdered was because of the story of Joseph. And it's actually said, you guys, right? They came to the rabbis and said, you were prepared to kill your brother, right, for the price of a pair of shoes. Right? And that's what they did. They ended up selling him, and they got money, and they bought shoes with the money. So it says that's that you are accountable for. So the Romans said, we're going to kill 10 of you to take the place of the 10 brothers, because Benjamin wasn't there; he was too little. I don't think he was even born. There were 10 brothers, right, who sold Yosef. So you are not. So you 10 have to die for that. That's the Romans talking. Now it's a rationalization. It's like the Nazis. We're going to kill 10 Jews because of they sold Joseph. There's a story that the Nazis said, we're going to kill a bunch of Jews because of the Jews hung the sons of Haman, so we're going to hang you Jews. In the eyes of the Romans, in the eyes of the Nazis, they don't realize what they're saying. They're just trying to be mean. But the fact that the rabbis saw that heaven had ordained this, that there had to be a payment for what happened with Yosef, that there was a flaw, a spiritual flaw, happened in the Sfas Emes says because Yosef couldn't hold himself back. If he had held himself back, that wouldn't have happened. And that is, he says, it teaches us in everyday life that if Yosef had held himself back, then the ability for Jews to get along in that fight would be easy. There'd be nothing to it. The fact that he didn't, right, left still a little flaw within the souls of all the Jewish people, that they're going to fight with each other just like they did in this story. And therefore, we see how important it is to not fight. Because by our holding ourselves back and using our ability to get along with each other and caring for each other, we repair the damage from that. That's what we do. So in our own lives, we can now understand, why does it seem so hard? Why is it you get a group of Italians together and they have a great time playing bocce ball? But you get a bunch of Jews together and they fight with each other. Like, why is that? You get 15 Jews, they open 2 shuls, and neither of them have women. Like, why do they do this? They have the famous joke, right, where the guy is on an island and a boat comes to the island after all those years, and they come there and he shows them around the island. And I've been here for so long, so I made, this is my house and this is my shul. And the guy says, what's that? He says, well, that's my other shul. I says, what's that for? He says, that's the one I won't go to. That's the idea. That's how we are. And that comes from the story. And he says that, Svatsanma says, if Yosef had waited, which he couldn't do, he's not a complaint on Yosef, it's a reality, then these types of things wouldn't have happened. They would have finished. Okay? So it's time for us to stop.
All right.